Where am I? Where am I specifically? What happened here? Why did it happen? Where am I specifically? What happened to these people and why? Hi, my name is Mark Bernard. I'm a monetary economist, and in this video, I want to talk about the collective unconsciousness, Russia, geopolitical events going on in Ukraine. But it's a meditation, and it's not as important what I say as where I am. Where am I? I'm in Kraków, Poland, Pomarowska 2. That's the ulica, that's the street. Number 2. And I actually used to work at an accounting firm down the street. And it's on Józefa. And the other day, I was actually looking for a flat on Józefa also. And it's a pretty nice flat. The lady wanted too much. But I've walked by this place many times, and I saw it, and I never really knew what it was. What it was the head of the Gestapo headquarters, not only in Kraków, but all of Poland, and you could argue all of, the German operations in World War II. Because this was the center, this is the nexus. And what I want to do is I want to discuss this in the context of history, but also what is going on geopolitically. And I think we know that these were on the bad guy side. These were evil. There's no question about it. It cannot be argued. It breaks my heart to even think about the things that went on in the cellar, this basement. And nobody can argue that point. But I want to bring up another point. Elie Wiesel, he wrote, I believe it was Night. And it was his experiences in a concentration camp. I believe he got the Nobel Prize for it. He said, those who are neutral are really on the side of the aggressor. So if you walk by and you see somebody that needs help in a life-saving way, and you say, I'm neutral, it's not my business, I'm going to stick my head in the sand. His underlying premise is, you're not neutral, you're on the side of the aggressor. And again, think about what they did in this place. Think about what happened. Poland never surrendered. A lot of other countries laid down their arms. Poland never surrendered. It was the only country that didn't surrender. They were non-neutral. Now, in the context of the geopolitical events going on today, you can make an analogy with Moscow, certainly not making an analogy with the US or anything going on in the US, which is a democracy, or any other country. But Moscow, there could be an argument. Now, if you take Moscow in the context of the entire 1920s, 30s, 40s, communism, and today, I think there's a strong argument in the total number of people that suffered under persecution, similar to Germany in the 1930s. Maybe Germany was more concentrated, and you could argue maybe it is stronger. But I think if you just say Moscow generally, in a historical context, you can make an argument that there's a parallel. Some people say it was worse, it was more numbers. Mr. Spock, Star Trek, one death is a tragedy to humans, but millions are a statistic. And there's some truth to that. You almost abstract away from that because you cannot imagine what went on here. Again, this is the headquarters of the Gestapo. What went on here? So I think there's an argument that Moscow, in its historical context, and even today, it has, in this geopolitical event in Ukraine, has 140,000 crimes against humanity that are accused. A lot of them very well documented, even on videotape, and they were atrocious, and some of them on par with some of the things that went here in Gestapo headquarters in 1939 to 1945. So this Russia, this Moscow, as it exists today, probably at the end of this geopolitical conflict will be responsible also for millions of lives lost on both sides, at least destroyed in some way, shape, or form. So although the numbers are not as high, we're not talking about numbers. Going back to Mr. Spock's quote, every single life is sacred and every single suffering is a tragedy. And those who perpetrate it, are guilty. Those who stand neutral, according to Elie Wiesel, are guilty because they're on the side of the accuser or the aggressor. What do you think about that? This is a conversation. What do you think about that statement? Now, I'm not making that parallel. I'm not extending it. It would be a huge error to extend it. I'm more cautious to extend it to something like what's going on in Washington. And because I believe Washington is a democracy. It's not as extreme as much as the media tries to hype it up. There are a lot of very good people on all sides in Washington. Okay, so don't, accuse me of that. However, there are a lot of neutral things going on. And you may reject Elie Wiesel's claim, and that's okay, that neutral is on the side of the aggressor when the whole world is a witness to things, such as what went on in the 1930s and 40s here in this Gestapo headquarters in Krakow, Poland. I mean, what do you feel about that claim that being neutral is on the side of the aggressor? It's not my claim. It's the Nobel Prize winner's claim. And he was, again, somebody in the camps who had a lot of time to think about what neutral good and evil was. This collective unconsciousness, I'll go back to that, like I mentioned in my last video, is kind of like, it's a mutate sometimes. Human organism, this world consciousness that we're trying to make the world a better place. And I alluded to the p53 gene in the human body, which tries to control mutations, and bring cell death to cells that get out of control, that mutate. But when it mutates, it can't control this, and it grows. That's what's growing in the collective unconsciousness of today? Just another mutation, a remission from back in the 1940s, this time being centered in Moscow? Or is it something different? That's the question. Definitely seems like a cult-like following in some ways in Moscow because they have this like gangster mentality. It's loyalty. It's loyalty to the leader, not efficiency and goodness or anything else that determines who gets power. That's what's happening in Moscow. Now, again, I am not drawing any analogies to Washington, because it's not the same. But we do have some interesting things happening in Washington. A lot of people are neutral. And Rubio, he voted against Ukraine aid. He's going to replace Blinken, the Secretary of State. I would say the guy's not neutral. Or he is neutral in one sense because he wants to stick his head in the sand and ignore it. Mike Waltz, okay? He is going to replace and be part of this defense and security advisor. I gave him that. He might be a nice guy. He lives kind of down the street from me. I corresponded with him, but I'm not his friend. I'm not an acquaintance. I don't want to make that claim. But his actions seem a little bit strange for somebody who has been, awarded valor, etc. He's wanting to stick his head in the sand like an ostrich and focus on he's chasing the Taliban 3.0, he made a claim. And China, yeah, you could say that's a bad actor. But, is that a distraction from Europe? When you've got a blitzkrieg going on in Europe across by a European-Asian alliance, rolling tanks across and missiles across Europe, free Europe, and you're going to turn your back on that, where countless war crimes are being committed, and then look at and go chase a boogeyman from the 90s. He calls it, maybe it could happen, Taliban 3.0. But isn't that a distraction? That's a question to him. He voted against Ukraine twice. Peter Hegseth. Did I say it right? Hegseth. Defense. The guy's never held a high rank. I mean, he's pretty, I would say, a low-ranked officer in the military. An administrative post. Give you some IQ tests or something. They did it to my father, too. My father rejected. I rejected. I don't want to be a part of that. but really he was getting out of college, ROTC, or he go to West Point. I was looking even at West Point. I think he went to Virginia Military Institute, or no, that was the other guy. I mean, as a major, which is fairly low ranked, in the words of Bro, he says, you're basically just gathering coffee. He's going to be in charge of a multi-million personnel organization. Yeah. Joined, and if I stayed there 10, 20 years, I probably would have. You're running the Department of Defense, which is 5 million people. If 2.5, and then if you include contractors and subcontractors, 2.5. Is he qualified, or his main claim to fame loyalty to the boss? Is that why these people are being chosen? Because of loyalty? A guy like Walls, he is a loyalist. He is a loyal to his commander. He did not persecute or want to pursue the January 6th thing against Trump. That shows loyalty, so he's being rewarded. He spoke a lot about PTSD. Poor guy. Does he have it himself? He speaks about it a lot. Maybe he doesn't. He hasn't mentioned it. I do know that special forces and soldiers in Ukraine from America who served in Afghanistan said that Ukraine is nothing like Afghanistan. Ukraine, Russia, it's a real war on par with World War II or World War I. And in Afghanistan, you pretty much lived in bases with bottled water and air support and et cetera, et cetera. You can't put it on par. So just, keep it in perspective. Not to mention the head of intelligence, Lucy. Okay, she is not the sharpest tool in the shed, but she's going to be the head of the U.S. intelligence agency. She has only displayed loyalty to the boss as her main resume checkmark. So again, we're here at the Gestapo headquarters. And I'm not drawing the analogy. Don't accuse me of that. Loyalty to a boss is probably the worst thing you could ever be or do. I want people leading us who think outside of the box, who think for themselves, who don't have loyalty to the boss, because that is what democracy is about. That is what freedom is about. So what is the peace plan? What is the endgame? The endgame is the Tsar of Russia removes 100% of his aggressive forces from Crimea, Donbass, and all of Ukraine, as agreed on paper in a world community, and starts to repair the damage he's done. Nothing else is acceptable. When Sergeant Schultz, or whatever his name is, calls Putin up the other day and starts dialoguing again, or Trump, did he really talk to Putin? I think he did talk to the Tsar of Russia, but I don't have direct evidence. But when other people start talking about peace and peace plans, it's very simple. Some things are black and white. One person, if you ever wonder who's on the wrong side, I think Gerdes said that, and he's a professor of history, or at least leadership, just ask yourself, who is the aggressor? When you have these advisors and picks and cabinet members repeating Russian talking points, I question their moral judgment. And on Gerdes, and he is correct, I don't agree with him on everything, Professor Gerdes, really don't. But he says, if you ever wonder who's right or wrong, who's doing the aggression? If you see somebody on the street being attacked to an innocent victim, are you going to be neutral? Are you questioning? Oh, maybe the guy on the ground, or the lady on the ground, or the child on the ground, maybe we don't know. You help. So the peace plan, anything other than a complete Moscow withdrawal and stopping the aggression is unacceptable, because we cannot forget history. Remember what happened in the World War I. It was a peace for 20 years. Ferdinand Foch, the French marshal, proclaimed it. This is not an armistice. It's just a peace. This is an armistice for 20 years. He was correct. World War II started. Anything less than a complete elimination from the collective unconsciousness of this aggression and acceptance of aggression and dialoguing with aggression and communicating and chatting and have warm fuzzies or whatever the politicians claim with aggression is unacceptable for me as a person who's moral and thinking. And think about where I am today. I'm at Gestapo headquarters, historical Gestapo headquarters, Krakow, Poland, what was in the 1939 to 1945. And I can show you some of the things and some of the comments and quotes, and I can take you down into the cellar, but I prefer not to. But just meditate on where I am, Pomorska 2, Pomorska 2, Ulice Street, Krakow, Poland, Gestapo headquarters. My name is Mark Giernot. I'm a monetary economist. Have a great day. Thank you very much. Thank you.